multiplication word problems that you needed to solve the other day in class. Now, when we're doing multiplication word problems, it's really important to kind of think our way through the steps that we need to do. And in addition, these particular problems were actually multi-step problems. So you needed to figure out what needed to be done each way. Sometimes it included multiplication, sometimes it didn't. So we have to go through that and solve for that. So the first thing that I always like to do is I always like to read through my problems twice. First time I read through just to get an idea of what it's about. The second time I'm going to start looking for the specific information. So Mrs. Rubin loves to bake cookies. Mrs. Rubin bakes a dozen cookies and gives the cookies to her 4 children to share equally. Mrs. Rubin thinks her class of 24 students will each like to have the same amount of cookies as her children. How many total cookies will Mrs. Rubin bake for her class of 24 students? Show all your mathematical thinking. Now that I've read it through to the end, now I want to go back in and find the important information. I know there's a couple of things going on in here, so I've figured out, okay, it's multi-step. That's the first thing I'm realizing. So now I'm going to start down at the question, actually. How many total cookies will Mrs. Rubin bake for her 24 students? So I know that I'm looking for the cookies for the students. Now I'm going to continue to look back in and get some information from the rest of the problem. Mrs. Rubin loves to bake cookies. That's fun, don't really need to know. She bakes a dozen cookies and gives them to her 4 children to share equally. So right now, that's not helping me with the bottom part. So in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put those in green because that's not helping me with the bottom part, but I'm probably going to need to know that. She also thinks her class of 24 students will each like the same amount of cookies as her children. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know how many she gave her children, but I do know I can figure that out. Remember, up here, it told us how she did with her children. So now let's take a look at the steps that I'm going to need to do to solve this particular problem. So the first thing I need to do is I need to figure out how many cookies she bakes for her kids, her own kids. So she baked a dozen cookies, which is 12. So she did 12 cookies, and she gave them to her 4 children. So she divides that by 4. So that means that each child gets 3 cookies. Now that's a basic fact, so I'm assuming most of you solved that, but we could also do this. Here's the 4 children. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Those are the 3 cookies for each. Now this is part 1. Part 2 now is, okay, her students would like the same amount. That means her students would each like to have 3 cookies. Well, she has 24 students, so she's going to give 3 cookies to each student. She needs to do 24 times 3. So now to solve that, I'm just going to go off on the side, do my 24 times 3. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 72. So finally, Mrs. Rubin bakes 72 cookies for her students.